Every morning, same thing. Your hands won't open right. Your knees don't want to go. So you reach for that bottle again. 40, 60, $100 a month, and you are still reaching. My name is Eula Hatfield, Harlan County, Kentucky. My grandmother never spent a dime on joint pain in 90-some years of living. She had something growing right off the hillside that belongs to the same chemical family as the aspirin in your medicine cabinet. Cost her nothing. Most folks have clean forgotten it's even there. The hardest part is right after you wake up. It's not just the cold in the room, but the way your fingers won't quite close around the coffee cup. You sit there waiting for your knees to remember how to bend. Most folks, they keep a bottle on the nightstand. You learn to reach for it before your feet even touch the floor. Glucosamine, turmeric, whatever the latest promise is. They fill the shelves, but the ache stays. You swallow another pill, wait for something to change, and count the days until your next refill. The money slips away month after month, and still you find yourself rubbing at the same sore spots, wondering if this is just how it's meant to be. There's a tiredness that settles in, not just in your joints, but in your spirit too. My name is Eula Hatfield, and I was born here in Harlan County, Kentucky. I've spent every day of my life in this same hollow, with the ridge rising up behind the house and the creek running down below. Folks around here measure distance in footsteps, not miles, and I know every bend in the path from the porch to the spring house. What I know about easing aches and stubborn joints, I learned from my grandmother, Martha Hatfield. She never read from a book or kept a recipe card. Instead, she kept her medicine on a shelf above the wood stove. Row after row of jars, each one holding a different color from the hillside. As a child, I'd sit quiet on a three-legged stool and watch her work. When someone came limping in, she'd reach for just the right jar without a word, her hand steady and sure. Sometimes it was dried leaves, sometimes a root she dug herself, but always she moved with a kind of patience you don't find in stores. That old shelf was our pharmacy, and Martha was the only doctor most of us ever knew. I learn by watching, not by asking. You pay attention, you remember how the light hits the jars in the morning, and you trust your hands to do what hers did before you. Around here, that's how knowledge stays alive, from one pair of hands to the next. For the folks who want all 200 of these mountain methods in one place, the remedies, the pest control, the food preservation, the cleaning, the garden, and the daily habits that kept my grandmother healthy into her 90s. I have written them all down in a book. You will find the link below. I will not mention it again. If you want it, it is there. Now, let me tell you about the first plant my grandmother always reached for when the weather turned and her knees began to ache. Teaberry. Teaberry is what we always called it, though some folks know it as wild wintergreen. If you look close along the north side of the ridge, where the ground stays cool and the soil runs a little sour under the oaks and pines, you'll find it hugging the earth. The plant itself never grows tall, just a patch of dark, shiny leaves pressed low against the moss, green all through the winter when everything else has turned brittle. Come fall, the berries turn bright as holly, a red you can spot even in the fading light. My grandmother taught me that you don't need a field guide or a fancy book to tell if you've found the right thing. You just pick a leaf and crush it between your fingers. If it fills the air with that sharp, sweet scent, something like peppermint and clean mountain wind, you've got Teaberry. That wintergreen smell is the surest sign. Long before we ever called it by its Latin name, Gaultheria procumbens, Cherokee and Algonquin families were gathering these same leaves for aching joints. The knowledge runs deeper than memory, passed from hand to hand, just like the leaves themselves. When the cold settles in and your bones start to complain, this little plant waits right where it always has, quiet and steady, on the shaded slope. Teaberry's secret is tucked inside those glossy leaves, a compound called methyl salicylate. That is the same family as aspirin, and it works in much the same way. When you drink a gentle tea from the leaves, that methyl salicylate helps quiet the body's pain signals by blocking the very thing that stirs up swelling and soreness. Prostaglandins. Doctors call it cyclooxygenase inhibition. But all you need to know is this. It turns down the fire in your joints, just like a low-dose aspirin would. Over in Germany, their big herbal commission, the Commission E, has given wintergreen its stamp for easing inflammation. You would not know it from the price tags at the drugstore, but those muscle rubs and pain patches on the shelf are loaded with concentrated methyl salicylate, squeezed from this same plant family. Now I need to be plain about the limits. If you are taking blood thinners or have trouble with bleeding, you need to talk to your doctor first. And the oil, what they call oil of wintergreen, is powerful, even dangerous, if you take too much. A cup of leaf tea is not the same as the oil, not by a long shot. That is the honest word, and I will not skip it. Most folks think of medicine as something that comes in a bottle, but in my grandmother Martha's house, it started with a step out onto the frost-stiff ground. I remember one November morning, clear as yesterday, Martha's house shoes waiting by the door, her breath hanging in the air as she bent down by the edge of the old woodpile, fingers nimble despite the cold. She'd gather a small handful of teaberry leaves, glossy and dark against the moss, and bring them inside before the sun had fully crested the ridge. The kettle was always waiting on the back of the stove, wrapped in a faded tea towel to keep the heat. Martha never hurried with this part. She'd count out 10, sometimes 15 fresh leaves, or if the weather had turned and the leaves were already dried, she'd measure a tablespoon. The water never boiled. She would say that was the quickest way to ruin a good cup. Instead, she would heat it just enough so that steam curled, but did not rattle the lid, about as hot as you would want for a bath, not a rolling boil. That's the secret, about 180 degrees, though Martha did not own a thermometer. She poured the water over the leaves, covered the pot right away, and let it sit untouched for a full 10 minutes. It takes patience to let the leaves give up their goodness. When the time was up, she'd strain the tea into a mug, the liquid turning a pale gold that caught the morning light, filling the kitchen with a clean, wintergreen scent. Martha always said the first cup tasted like the woods after a rain, fresh, a little sharp and honest. She never sweetened it, but you could if you liked. This wasn't a remedy for a single bad day or a quick fix for when the ache got too loud. It was a daily habit, a quiet promise to your own body. 1 cup every morning before the day's work began. Martha would say, give it a week, 7 days, no skipping, before you decide if it's worth keeping. Some mornings I still hear her voice reminding me, the old ways work slow, but they work steady. That's the kind of medicine you can trust. When the ache in her knees got too sharp for walking, my grandmother never reached for a bottle. She would step outside, even if frost rimed the grass, and come back with a fresh handful of teaberry leaves. I remember watching her, thumb and fingers working slow and steady, pressing the leaves between both palms until the green turned dark and the scent sharpened in the air. That's how you know the plant is ready. The leaves go wet with their own juice, slick as if rain had kissed them. It's not enough just to tear them. You have to bruise them well, coaxing out what the body needs. She would fill her palm, just enough to cover it, and crush the leaves together until the shine came up. Then she would lay the bruised leaves right over the sore joint, sometimes her wrist, sometimes a knee that refused to bend. She would rub them in slow, firm circles, letting the wintergreen oil seep into the skin. The trick is to move with purpose, not to rush. The scent rises up while you work, sharp and clean, and you can almost feel the tightness begin to loosen beneath your hand. After that, she would leave the leaves in place for 20, maybe 30 minutes. On the bad days, when the weather turned and the pain settled deep, she would do this morning and evening, every day until the spell passed. When the time was up, she would rinse the spot with warm water, never cold, and pat it dry. That was her way, and it's mine too, when the ache grows stubborn. Some things you learn by watching and remembering, not by reading a label or counting out pills. My grandmother never believed in teaching from a distance. She'd press a leaf into your hand, close your fingers around it, and say, now remember this shape, this smell. You'll know it when you need it. That's how mountain knowledge settles in, not from a bottle or a line in a book, but from the plant itself, passed from palm to palm. When I was a girl, she'd sometimes skip the kettle altogether. On a quiet afternoon, she'd pluck a single teaberry leaf, bright and cool, and hand it to me with a nod. Chew this slow, she'd say. Let it last you the morning. That's the gentlest way I know to use teaberry. Not a rescue for sharp pain, but a daily habit, like tying your shoes or brushing your hair. 1 or 2 fresh leaves, never more, chewed slow and steady through the day. The taste is sharp at first, then sweetens as you go, and the wintergreen works its way in quiet, a little at a time. It's no quick fix, just a soft easing, a way to keep the joints from stiffening as the hours pass. My grandmother called it maintenance, and I've kept to that word. If you chew more than a couple, the taste grows bitter, and your belly may protest. But 1 or 2 leaves every day is enough. That's how the old ways teach you patience, and how the body learns to trust the land again. Black cohosh is what my grandmother called snake root, though some folks in these parts know it by other names. Its true name is Actea racemosa, but nobody around here ever bothered to say it that way. If you want to find it, You look in the deep shaded hollows where the ground stays dark and damp all year. The plant stands tall, 4, sometimes 5 feet by midsummer. Its leaves wide and divided, each leaflet edged with little teeth. When June comes, you will see a long white spike of flowers rising up like a candle in the gloom. Martha called them fairy candles, and I never forgot the way they glowed against the shadows. The medicine is in the root, thick and dark, twisted like old driftwood, and bitter as anything you will ever taste. The Cherokee called it rheumatism weed, and they taught the early settlers to use it for deep aches, pain that settles in the bones and refuses to let go. Inside that root are triterpene glycosides and salicylic acid. Science folks say those are what help with swelling and pain. They quiet the body's alarms and open up the small blood vessels, letting warmth and fresh blood reach the places that hurt most. It is not just old stories. Black cohosh was listed in the United States Pharmacopoeia from 1820 clear through 1936, back when doctors still trusted what the land could offer. Now, I need to be plain about the limits. Do not use black cohosh if you are pregnant, have liver trouble, take liver medicines, or give it to children. Folks with hormone-sensitive conditions ought to talk to a doctor first. That is the honest word, and I will not skip it. Every autumn, when the leaves turned and the air sharpened, Martha would kneel in the backyard, wrapped in her brown sweater, spade in hand. She worked the soil with patience, searching beneath the leaf mold for black cohosh. The root grew deep and twisted, hidden under the tangle of last season's stems. When she found it, she would lift it out, dirt clinging to her fingers, the smell sharp and earthy, bitter enough to sting the nose. In the kitchen, Martha sliced the root thin, steady, and precise. She measured out half a teaspoon of dried root, chopped small, and dropped it into a small pot with 2 cups of cold water. She always started with cold water, never rushing the process. The pot sat on the stove with the flame low, the water warming slowly. Martha warned that a hard boil would spoil the medicine. She brought it to a gentle simmer, just enough for a few bubbles, and let it go for 20 minutes. The scent filled the room, earthy, sharp, unmistakable. When the liquid turned deep brown, she took it off the heat and let it cool until it was comfortable to touch. She strained the decoction through a fine sieve, catching every bit of root. Half a cup went into a mug, and a spoonful of raw honey was stirred in to soften the bitterness. Martha drank it slowly, letting the warmth settle. The rest she saved for later, always careful. Never more than half a teaspoon of dried root in a day. Her pattern was steady, 2 or 3 weeks of tea, then a week's rest. She said the body needed time to recover. Now, with wild black cohosh stands thinning and slow to return, buying dried root is the wiser choice. Mountain Rose Herbs and Frontier Co-op both offer it for $3 or $4 an ounce, enough to last if measured with care. That's how Martha did it, and the land is better for it. Every month, folks hand over $40, sometimes $100 just to keep the aches at bay. That's $500 to $1,200 a year. And there's no finish line, just another bottle, another refill, another promise that maybe this time relief will last. The shelves at the store are lined with choices, each one more expensive than the last. But a handful of teaberry leaves and a pouch of black cohosh root costs less than a single week's worth of pills. $5, maybe $7 for both, and that's if you have to buy them. No company can patent a leaf from the hillside, and there's no advertising budget for what you can gather with your own hands. It isn't a plot or a secret, just a system that keeps quiet about the cheaper ways. I've watched the old jars on the shelf give way to bottles from the pharmacy, and with them, a piece of the knowledge that once kept us well. Take the Teaberry tea you have learned and make it your morning habit for 1 week. Just 7 days, no skipping. If the hillside near your house holds nothing but weeds, you can order dried teaberry leaf from Mountain Rose Herbs for $2 or $3, enough to last a month or more. Each morning, brew a cup before the ache sets in. Notice if your knees remember how to bend a little easier, or if your hands close around the cup without complaint. This is meant for the daily aches, stiffness, sore knees after work, the kind of pain that comes and goes. It will not mend a joint that is worn out, or take the place of a doctor if you are living with severe arthritis. But give it a week, and see if you rise from bed with a bit more ease. Let me know if Teaberry grows near you, and whether the first week brought any small change. These hills still offer more than memory. They offer medicine if you know where to look. While drug prices rise and aches linger, mountain plants just keep coming back each spring, steady as the sunrise. In a world quick to forget old ways, that choice remains right outside your door. Take a walk and see what you might find. Let me know if you give it a try.